Hello bookworms! It's Jade from Bedtime Bookworm, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here to do the I Am the Reader book tag. I was tagged to do this by Amy from Amy's Vlog About Books. She's a smaller booktuber that I have really enjoyed watching, but she hasn't posted in over a month. So Amy, if you're watching this, I miss your videos, please come back. The original creator of this tag was Emma from Emma Books. I will leave Amy's video as well as Emma's down in the description box in case you want to check them out. Alright, let's get started. The first question is, choose one word that describes being a reader. I took a minute to think about this because I didn't have an answer that immediately jumped into my mind. But I think the answer that I want to give for this is open-minded. I think by reading a lot of books, we as readers get to have lots of experiences that are different from ours. And in that sense, it makes us really open-minded and more empathetic of people in other situations. Obviously, that depends a little bit on what you read, but I think in general, if you're a reader, you're gonna have that experience. Question number 2 is, what's the very first book that you fell in love with? This was hard for me to think back because I started reading when I was fairly young, but the first book that I really remember loving was probably Little House on the Prairie by Laura Ingalls Wilder. I was pretty obsessed with that series when I was like in the 2nd and 3rd grade, and I read all of them. And it's the first book or series that I remember being obsessed with. Question number 3 is hardback or paperback? And this one was very easy for me to answer. I am definitely a paperback fan. I like paperbacks, especially like the larger American like trade paperbacks that are floppy and stay open fairly easily. Paperbacks are just lighter to carry around. Not that I carry books around very often. Usually I travel with an audiobook or an ebook or both. But in those moments where I do want to travel with a paperback, they're much lighter than hardbacks. And I also just have a much harder time reading out of a hardback. I read a lot in bed and laying down, and the number of times I've dropped a hardcover book on my face while reading it, probably because I'm falling asleep because I read at bedtime, I can't even count the number of times it's happened. Another reason why I prefer paperback, actually, now that I think about it, is that cover that comes on hardbacks. I don't know why I can't remember what they're called right now. I know that they have a name, but I usually will take that off when I'm reading a hardcover book if it's not a library book, and then it tends to get lost or smushed somewhere. I take it off to preserve it, but in the end, something ends up happening to it anyways. Question number 4 is, how has reading shaped your identity? This is kind of a tough question. I mentioned that I started reading really young, and I read all the way through high school, but there was a period at the end of high school and beginning to middle of college where I wasn't reading very much, and then again like in grad school where I kind of stopped reading too, just because I was so busy reading for school and I didn't have time to read for fun, or I didn't feel like reading for fun when I had read so much for school. And a lot of my identity was shaped during that time period, but now that I've gotten back into reading, it's definitely a big part of my identity again. So it's interesting to me that it is a big part of my identity, but it's kind of come and gone throughout my life. I think more recently reading has led me to consider or pursue possibly writing stories, and that has in turn led me down the path of discovering what makes a good story, how do people structure their plots, and what about those structures works and doesn't work. I've really started to see stories in any formats, including like TV and movies, in a different light. I'm kind of starting to see like the wheels in motion and kind of understanding what makes different stories tick, and I've really enjoyed that. I don't think I really answered the question, but I gave it a shot. Question number 5 is, what book do you read when you need to be comforted? I am not a big rereader. Most of the time when I reread something, it is solely because I'm trying to continue on in a series and I need to refresh my memory. In times past, I might have said Harry Potter, but I haven't read Harry Potter in a really long time. I'm sure I would find comfort in reading it, but it's definitely not something that I have reached for in a while. The only answer that really comes to mind, I guess, is the Wheel of Time series, and I don't know if that's just because it's like at the top of my mind because I am currently rereading the series. I'm in the middle of reading the 5th book right now for our Wheel of Time read-along, but I am definitely finding a lot of comfort in this series. I just grew up reading, especially these first whatever books, so many times, and I have a lot of fond memories of them, and I love these characters. They hold such a special place in my heart, and I do find these books really comforting to reread. So I'm gonna go with the Wheel of Time series. Question number 6 is, who taught you to be a reader? Or did you do it all on your own? So I would say my dad taught me how to read. I have lots lots of memories of us using Hooked on Phonics. Let me know down in the comment section if you guys learned to read using Hooked on Phonics as well, because I sure did. And we would sit and listen to the tapes and like look through the books and do the flashcards. And I've always known that my dad is a big reader. He doesn't read as much now as I think he used to when he had more time, but he has always had a big passion for books. And I think he was definitely an inspiration to me when I was young as far as wanting to be a reader. Question number 7 is describe your dream reading lounge. I don't really need a lot of things to be comfortable reading. Like I said, like to read laying down, so I would need a super comfy couch or a bed. Definitely not a reading chair. I know a lot of people like reading chairs. I can do reading chairs, but at some point I'm gonna want to lay flat. So I need something that I can stretch out on. I definitely need a comfy blanket because even if I'm not really that cold, I like to be covered up and bundled. As far as like the aesthetics of the room, I don't think I care that much, but ideally maybe like a library setting, a bunch of shelves being surrounded by books, maybe having like a skylight or something to let in a lot of natural light during the day. Although, like I said, I do most of my reading at night, so I guess I would also need a really nice like reading lamp next to my reading couch. Yeah, that sounds good. And the last question is, what book changed the way you act or see the world? If you've been around my channel, you know that I mostly read like fantasy, sci-fi, thrillers, and those are not typically the kind of books that are going to make you change your view of the world. So I kind of had a hard time coming up with an answer. But in the end, I have settled on Joy Luck Club. This is by Amy Tan, and I read this years ago. Honestly, I think I read it like in the 6th or 7th grade, and I did a book report on it or something. But I remember that when I read this book, it was the first time that I'd really felt that I saw myself in a book. So the Joy Luck Club is all about like mother-daughter relationships and second generation versus first generation immigrant experiences. And in case you don't know, my mother is first generation Korean. She came to the United States when she was in her early 20s. So I am half Korean and have dealt with some of these like second generation, not issues, but you know, the things that people deal with. And I remember reading this book and just feeling very understood when I read about the children of these immigrants and how they had a hard time getting along with their more traditional parents. It's definitely a really old book, and not many people talk about it on BookTube at all or anymore. But I definitely recommend it, especially if you're interested in some of those second generation experiences that I mentioned. There's also a movie adaptation, which I think was done pretty well. Okay, so those are all of the questions. I am going to be tagging some people, so stay tuned to see who I tag. Rhiannon from Crescent Moon Reads. Aoife from Fred Weasley Died Laughing. Shelby from Read and Find Out. Yasmin from Yasmin's Bookshelf. And Katie from Girl About Library. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you like bookish content. I post 1 to 2 times a week. That is all I have for now. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bookworms, keep reading. Bye.